Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Making the Move from iManage to Microsoft 365, 5 crucial tips to ease your DMS migration. My name is Gary Palmer, and I'm your host for today, along with our guest expert, Proventech CTO and co-founder, Rakesh Chancheri. A quick bit of housekeeping, if I may, before we start. You are very, very welcome to submit questions at any time using the question panel on your screen, and we'll do our best to address them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We are recording the webinar today, and we will make the recording available to you all over the next day or so. Okay, so for today's webinar, we're going to talk about moving your firm's document management from iManage to a modern cloud-based solution based on Microsoft 365. We'll share some of the drivers behind making this move according to our customers and what we've heard from them in their recent projects. And then Rakesh will talk about 5 key recommendations that you should consider, and he'll go on to demonstrate actually how do you migrate your content from iManage to Microsoft 365 safely and securely. Both Repstore and Proventech have worked with a variety of customers to do this over the years, including law firms, accounting firms, and corporate legal departments, all with one objective in mind. How do they harness the investment that they've already made in that Microsoft 365 platform by using it for document or matter management instead of continuing to use iManage? Repstore provides the document and matter management capability based on 365, and Proventech are experts in migrating content from iManage to a new Microsoft 365 platform. So when we talk to our customers, they typically talk about 5 main drivers or reasons for making this very strategic move. The first is the cloud. So the adoption of cloud computing is really accelerating, and companies typically no longer want to manage their own data centers with all of its associated cost and resource, security challenges, and so on. And in fact, COVID-19 has really accelerated this. The second key driver is money, financial. So by moving to Microsoft 365, our customers typically reduce the annual running costs associated with iManage by about 30 to 50%, which delivers a really compelling return on investment. And those cost savings come from reduced software subscriptions, leveraging the E3 and E5 licenses, lowering the infrastructure costs and the upgrade and support costs as well. The third driver is really to align with your company's 365 strategy. What we're finding is that our customers want to do more and more with this platform, starting with collaboration and document management, as we're going to talk about today, but adding other use cases such as external collaboration, automation, and analytics. And Microsoft is investing billions in R&D and bringing innovative technologies such as Cortex for machine learning and delivering more and more value from this platform with some really exciting new use cases. So it's hard to understand how bespoke or so-called best-of-breed solutions could compete with that sort of scale of investment. Another really key driver is Microsoft Teams. COVID-19 has driven millions of people around the world to use Teams to work from home and bluntly to keep their jobs. So the adoption of Teams has really exploded. You can see there the latest figures from Microsoft, and our customers are telling us that Teams is really here to stay, and applications that do not integrate seamlessly with Teams and the wider Microsoft 365 platform increasingly will be at risk of being replaced. And then finally, customers talk about how can they consolidate and reduce complexity in their IT landscape. A lot of our customers have grown through mergers and acquisitions, and their IT landscape becomes more and more complex. So by deploying solutions that are based on 365, it just becomes easier to provide a familiar and better user journey for their employees by moving to that platform. And then just to sort of finish up, we typically see 3 kind of objections that we need to overcome, or kind of 3 myths that need to be debunked. The first one is Microsoft 365 doesn't work for busy lawyers and accountants, and this is just not true. There are tens of thousands of lawyers and accountants out there using Repstore for document or matter management in 365 every day. The second one is just inertia, the cost of change and the complexity of change. And what we see there is that that familiar Microsoft way of working makes that transition actually really easy to do. So we've got, we've seen a number of customers switching from iManage to 365 during COVID-19. And then finally, it's difficult and costly to migrate millions of documents into that 365 world. Well, it's not trivial, but as you'll see from Rakesh's demo, if you engage an expert practitioner, you can do this safely and securely at scale. So there's really no reason not to do this. So with that, I will stop talking now, and I will hand you over to Rakesh so that he can share with you his advice on how to do this and actually show you how to migrate that content. Rakesh.
Thank you, Gary. So you heard from Gary why you should consider moving from iManage to Microsoft 365. What I would like to touch upon is how can you actually do this? Now that's generally the million-dollar question. So we'll look at a few of those key areas as to what the main difference is and how you can actually do the migration. Gary, do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah. Now, iManage, fundamentally, it's a document management system. And Microsoft 365, many people might deem it to be a document management system, but there are a lot of differences between these two platforms that you need to be aware of before you can embark on this, this transition from one platform to the other. iManage, it's primarily deals with documents and emails. Whereas on the Microsoft 365, over the last few years, it has evolved into a lot more than just document management. It's a very mature content services platform, allowing you to do a lot of things. iManage has a core focus on the legal industry, although there are other industries like construction and others who tend to use it. Microsoft 365, it's used across all industries. It's agnostic to the industry, to the type of data, the way you work. It's a platform that you can mold into the way you really want it to work with. iManage tend to be a lot of matter-centric. You have a lot of workspaces. That's how it's primarily driven. So you would see sales having multiple workspaces and so on, whereas O365 or M365 works a bit differently. Now, a lot of users in iManage generally tend to work with Outlook. They like to, drag and drop emails from Outlook, have that kind of integration. Whereas within Microsoft 365, there are so many tools available for different kinds of things. The productivity tools, there is a plethora of tools available. So the main thing is when you move from one platform to other, what are the things to consider? There are a lot of things available. How can you make the best use of them, but at the same time understand what they're capable of and how you can get this into a compatible way? So in the next slide, we will now look at 5 key areas that you need to consider. So these are typically the main challenges that you have. So the first one is a structural difference. So as I was saying, it's very matter-centric in iManage. You see a lot of matters coming up, and then there might be groups of matters or workspaces for each department. Now, within the Microsoft ecosystem, you might have teams or just SharePoint sites or Office 365 groups that are different things. And you need to keep that in mind, especially going for that flat hierarchy, but still having some kind of hub sites and other hierarchies put in place. You need to decide how this data will end up in the new environment. There could be a lot of deep nested hierarchies with folder structures, which you need to consider moving across because there are some restrictions on how deep these folders can go. The other interesting concept is of multi-filed content. You could potentially have a content that is in one location or one folder, which could exist or which could appear in other folders within iManage. In SharePoint, you wouldn't typically do it that way. You would have the document in one location. Other locations would be a link, so you would know they are a link or a reference rather than an individual document. So knowing upfront how that is set up within iManage and how that should end up in Microsoft is quite important. And the other concept of a personal content and matter-centric content. So you do have the concept of your personal workspace in iManage. So here in the Microsoft ecosystem, you would want to move such documents into your OneDrive. So you have OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint. So you need to work with a mixture of these platforms. The second thing you need to be careful of is document versions. Now, primarily, there are versions supporting both the platform, but in iManage, you might see there are a lot of files which could have different file names in the versions. So for example, one of the document could be called report 2018 docx. The other one could be report 2019 docx. Now the names, if it changes, SharePoint typically expects a single file name. You could have different titles, but the name needs to be the same. Similarly with extensions, you might have a doc file and then a PDF file as a second extension. This is something you need to be mindful of when you go into the Microsoft ecosystem. So knowing this upfront will help you understand how that fidelity of the content can be retained as you take this across. In the next slide, we will see the other areas, so classification and metadata. In iManage, you would have your doc classes and subclasses and other types which are available for you to categorize the content. In the SharePoint world, you have a much richer content type which you can inherit, which you can publish from the hub or have it on a site collection level. So there is a lot of things you need to consider before you move. So it is not just about taking the current classification or metadata. This is also an opportunity for you to see how your current business is structured and how you can take this as an opportunity to enrich that classification, enrich that metadata. Perhaps you didn't have enough metadata on source. So how can you make it better so it can be much more searchable, or you can categorize that better? The security is yet another important thing. You might have security set at each workspace level in iManage, or it could be at a folder or document level. It could go quite granular. Now, this is also an opportunity for you to see how well that security is structured. Is it doing what it's supposed to do, or has it organically grown into things where people have constantly applied security and doesn't make sense? Not just that, the security model is different. Your permissions in iManage and your permission levels, which is a combination of different permissions in SharePoint, might not be exactly the same. So you need to consider what is the best fit permission for this particular scenario. And should it be retained on a document level, or should you just take it that all the way up to your library or a site collection level? The last thing is the proprietary hyperlinks. A lot of people don't realize that sometimes content do link to other content. So for example, you might have a Word document, a proposal which might be linking to other related documents, or an Excel spreadsheet which might be linking to other spreadsheets. These links will break if they are these iManage links. And I'll show you again in the demo how some of these things can be catered for. So these are the 5 key areas. Of course, there might be other things we could look at, but primarily these 5 things tend to trip you up. So how do you make sure that these things are catered for? So the first thing is having an actionable insight. So an insight into your content by having an in-depth discovery to analyze what is there. So you know exactly the type of data you have, what you need to move, what you don't have to, which are critical, which are sensitive, and also doing the pre-migration checks to understand that incompatibility or the differences between these two systems, so you can plan for it upfront. You do not have to worry about it as you're doing things and things start failing. That's not how you want to do it. Next is to design for success. What that means is you need to look at what your business is currently doing, what the current functions are, and what are the capabilities of this much richer platform, the new modern platform, and things are evolving every day. How can you make use of that rather than just moving a workspace as it is? Look at how you can enable teams, how you can spread that across various teams, how that information architecture should look like, and also use that right workload or the right tools, which of it should go through Outlook, what should come through a web interface, what should be consumed through Teams. You need to design for that. Transformation for productivity. This is the whole restructuring or the enrichment, right from your structure into multiple locations, your enrichment of classification, metadata, and your security and enforcing the compliance. And the other important thing for any business would be the continuity, business continuity. Now that can be ensured by having minimal downtime, which could be done through an incremental migration. So you do not have to worry about moving terabytes of data and then shutting down the business, but it can be done in a way where business is still continuing, whereas you can then have incremental migration to cater for that, or even phased migrations where each department could just move across and start adopting the new platform. And another important thing is that right training and adoption, so they realize what this platform is capable of and then start making the best use of it. And to support all of these things, you need the right tool, the right people, and the right process in place. And that would mean a high throughput automated migration. So you're not doing it manually, it's fully automated, tested. You need an accountability for every item so you can be sure that all business critical data has come through. And you need to enforce that compliance automatically, so you do not have to worry about data suddenly being exposed in a way in the new environment. So with that in mind, what I would like to do is show you how you can actually do some of those things rather than me just talking about it. So Gary, is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm hoping yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah. So I'm going to quickly show you how you can gain some insight into your data within iManage, use that to classify and enrich the content, restructure the content, and to enforce some compliance as part of that. So this demo will show you how that can be done by connecting to a particular iManage system and moving that across. So to start with, you can connect to the iManage database. Now, we connect to the database so that it doesn't impact the production environment. And from there, it will show you all the public workspaces and the personal workspaces that are available so that it can be moved to either SharePoint or OneDrive. You can connect to Office 365 at the tenant level or at a site collection level based on how you want to move, and then create a task which will now do the migration. Now, you could specify some filters, so you do not want to move all your workspaces. This is where you could pick up maybe sales or finance or some of those workspaces, and then do a discovery to find out what exactly is present in those workspaces. Next, you could start some analysis process. That analysis will go deeper into the content to understand what exactly is there. Now, the analysis could include using some custom classification models or doing the rot detection, so those redundant, obsolete, and trivial, which will then potentially save you a lot of storage space, and doing all the pre-migration checks, which will give you every sort of incompatibility between these two systems. And this is crucial to ensure that the data goes in without any issues. The Power BI screens then go into every aspect of the data to give you actionable insights. You can see the different extensions, the different classes. Like here, there are a lot of report documents. Also on the right-hand side, a size distribution, which type of content is taking a majority of the size. You can look at data from different dimensions. This is time-based, when it was created, modified, who is creating it, modifying it, how the size of the data has been growing, what type of data has been created, its distribution in various folders so that it doesn't have impact on the SharePoint's list view threshold. Looking at it even hierarchically, a deep dive to see at which level you have how many folders, how many documents, what size. Also multi-filing. Here it's already telling me there are two items that, or rather it's one item in two different locations. So we know already this item has to be handled. Then the number of versions and the security, what type of security is set on which documents, on which workspaces, by whom. The rot analysis tells you the level of duplicate content. Here, about 2.5% of the content is duplicate, and also some of the obsolete and trivial content that are present. So you could decide to either filter them out or move it into locations that might not be active content. So that again influences your design decisions. The duplicates can be either binary duplicates, so you've copied the file, which happens quite a lot, or it can be even text duplicates where your extensions could be different, but the content is same. I mean, we tend to see a lot of emails being copied around in different folders. That's quite common. Then all the pre-migration checks. So here, this item is present in 2 locations. Then there are other items where you have items with the same name in the same folder. You might have dragged a couple of emails, or in this case, there are documents with the same name, which appear in the same folder. Empty folders, do you need to migrate them or not? Similarly, there could be mismatch in your version. So version 1 and version 2 has got a different name. So that tells you what kind of issues you could potentially have. Luckily, most of them will be handled automatically as part of migration. Next is the enrichment. How can you recategorize content? Perhaps you haven't set the right document classes within iManage, so you can create your own custom classes. You can map them onto custom content types and assign metadata, which could be all the metadata available from iManage could be just mapped as is, or you could enrich them by using custom rules to extract some data or transform some data. So here we are setting some rules to change the classification name and assign it. You can also set retention labels and make it more compliant. So data, when it ends up in M365, has got the right labels applied. You could also look at applying security labels, so the sensitivity labels. The link resolution helps you to change all the hyperlinks inside the document, which again we'll look at towards the end of this demo. Next is restructuring. Do you move them into different site collections? Just provide a simple CSV to say, okay, I need this moved into insurance personal and a different site collections. Even split that into different folders. Some of our customers have done this to restructure these templates. Your users and groups can also be mapped. So if there are people who have left organization, you can map them onto any active users. Similarly, permissions can also be mapped. So once all the mapping is done, the next thing is to process the data. Now, the interesting thing is you can do a transformation or just a dry run. So you do not load any document, but do a run to see what the outcome of all of these rules would look like. Straight away, you can see there are some failures because some rules don't really fit in well. There are some issues. But for the ones that have worked, you can have a look at the metadata at item level, the new name, the new location, the new metadata, the new classification. All of that can be validated, and this helps with the whole QA process to ensure that the data is indeed going into the correct location. Also, any legacy information like your document IDs or the original path can all be put in place. Issues can be picked up so you have visibility into what is going wrong, and after the right remediation, you can then load the data. Now, this supports very high throughput migration, which can also be scaled across multiple servers for very large amount of data. And the outcome is that your data is fully compatible with Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. It can be consumed from anywhere. It has gone into multiple site collections with all the key metadata. So here you can see the document type, the classification, the document ID, the original path. Everything has been retained, so you do not have to worry about losing any business critical information. So even the original path, that can also be maintained in case you want a reference to how it was originally stored in iManage. The retention label has been applied here. So now you know that automatically the content will be managed by Microsoft Compliance. The items that have been in multiple folders, a link to a document gets created. So it can be accessed from the 2 hierarchies. Items which have the same name, they automatically get a new name or rather a unique number at the end. So it doesn't fail the migration, it automatically gets in. The ones which had different name in the versions, or if they had block characters, you can see the underscore character has replaced all block characters, and all the version gets retained, including all of its key metadata. The permissions, the new set of permissions are applied as part of this. And the link resolution, so this hyperlink, you can see it has a link/ID. It's an ID-based link, which is an iManage link that after transformation, it now becomes a SharePoint link based on the new location of the document. So overall, the entire fidelity of this content, the integrity of the content is maintained. Not only that, you get a detailed report of every item, including every version of the document that has been processed either successfully, or if there was a problem, you would actually see. So this gives you a good overview of how content can be moved successfully from one end to the other. Yeah. So I would like to hand this back to Gary.
Thank you, Rakesh. That was really, really good. Thank you. Really great to get your expert insight and a great demo. So just to recap then on what we've seen and heard today. Actually, I don't think I'm sharing my screen, am I? Let me just do that. Sorry about that. So just to recap on what you've seen and heard today, there are many compelling reasons to move from iManage to 365 for document and matter management. Repsol's got a proven track record in helping customers make this change. You've heard today that the steps along that way are well understood and well mapped, and migrating your content can be done safely and securely, and ProvenTech has got many years of experience in helping their customers navigate through this process. So just before we head into the Q&A session, I'd like to just run a very brief poll, if I may. If Louise is going to put that one up. So the idea here is that we would like to offer everybody on the webinar a personalized demonstration of our matter and engagement management from Repsol, or a one-to-one personalized consultation from ProvenTech to really dig into the areas that Rakesh was covering there, or hopefully both, and see how that goes. Well, I'm delighted to say that most people want to see both, so that's absolutely great. Okay, I can see we've got a number of questions in our Q&A panel there. So just to remind you, if you'd like to submit a question, if you could please just use the question panel on your screen, and I'll do my best to navigate through these. I've got a funny feeling, Rakesh, most of these are coming your way. The first one was, does it matter what version of iManage you have? I guess that's specific to the migration piece. Does that matter, Rakesh?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so we do support many versions of iManage. We have done several migrations all the way from those 8.x, 9, 10. Yeah, so we do support different versions of iManage.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Just picking a few others. This is a really good one. Does the migration process have any kind of detrimental impact on the production iManage environment? And again, that one's to you, Rakesh.
Yeah, so it shouldn't, because of the way we do the migration. We do the migration from the looking at the database. So this allows you not to have a detrimental impact on the production environment. And not just that, the features of incremental migration also ensures that we can do the migration even at different time. We can phase it, and then just before go live, pick up the incremental set, and then make sure all the data is in. So a combination of all these factors ensure that the impact on the production system as well as the end users is minimal.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to work my way through these. This is one actually I've had this question from a customer just in the last couple of days. So I've got 4 or 5 terabytes of archived and active workspaces. How long will it take to migrate that content?
So generally, it doesn't take a lot of time. So as you saw from the demo, the solution itself is capable of automating a lot of these things. So the actual load shouldn't take time. So typically, migrations would take just a few weeks to a few months, again, based on the amount of data you have.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Rakesh. So this next one is multiple lines, but I'll try and distill it down. What happens for documents that have an explicit deny on the security? So I guess, content that's been marked as being very sensitive. What happens during the migration process then?
Yeah, so if you have any deny permissions, the security report should show you how that permission is have been used within iManage. Now, within the Microsoft 365 environment, you don't do an explicit deny. It is more of how it is allowed. And this is the bit where you need to look at the design. So that's the one I was telling you earlier on the assessment of security and then deciding if you just move the security as is, or you then look at it and redesign the security. Now, you have an option to move things as is, but when you have securities like deny, then you would typically use a custom rule to come up with a new equivalent permission that is more applicable in the target, and that can be set using those automated set of rules.
Okay, thank you, Rakesh. Next question is, if the database is hosted in iManage in a cloud environment, does it matter? So I guess that, again, that's related to migration there.
Yeah, so we have a customer, in fact, right now they are at the final stage of the migration, one of our customer in US who is using hosted iManage. So you can get a copy of the database from iManage, and we can work off that. So yes, even if you're a hosted customer, we can do the migration.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And there was a very early question. I'm just trying to scroll back through very quickly. And it's a very fair question. What about when Microsoft authentication went down and all content became unavailable? That's a really good question, and it's quite complex. But from a RepStore perspective, we're designed with offline working in mind. So users have access to their content on their machines wherever they are through mobile devices when they don't have access to networks. So it's possible to synchronize the matters that you're working on. I suspect there's a lot more behind that question, and we'll try and pick that one off with Gerald offline.
Yeah,
I'm just going to try and pick. Sorry, go ahead.
So just to touch upon that from a migration point of view, so if you're worried that when you're moving terabytes of data, suddenly something like this happens, it's not an issue because the migration solution is capable of handling the error scenarios, and it allows you an iterative process whereby everything that would have failed, let's say something went down for 2 hours, then those items, you can just reprocess only those failed items or the pending items. So it is designed for large enterprise grade migration.
Okay, and I think we've got time for just one more question, I think. How do you handle files being renamed and moved, or folders being renamed or moved after they've already been migrated to SharePoint? Will they end up as duplicates after doing so, or do you need to do an incremental migration? So that's from Rob, and that's a great question.
Yeah, no, it is really, it is a very good question. And the thing is, Delta migration is never as simple as you would imagine. Very simply put, it's just new, deleted, or modified content. But yeah, your question is absolutely valid. And there is a level of content freeze and user communication that becomes part of migration. So that's why I told at the very beginning, there's a concept of the product, process, and the people, and all three have to work together for a successful migration.
Okay, that's great, Rakesh. Thank you. I'm probably going to get kicked from the timing police in a minute, because I think we're definitely approaching the end of our time today. So if there are any questions that we haven't covered, we'll make sure that we email the individuals afterwards and make sure you get a full answer to those questions if we've missed anyone. So I'd just like to thank everybody again for joining us today. I hope you found it useful. As I said earlier, you'll all receive an email with a link to view this webinar again within the next couple of days. And we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar, which is on Thursday, the 5th of November. And beautifully, I don't have the slide up in front of me that I'm supposed to have, but there it is. Thursday, 5th of November, step-by-step guide to maximizing Teams productivity, best practices from highly successful deployments. So with that, stay safe and well, have a great day, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.